I came across this case a couple of years ago while researching missing person files in eastern Kentucky. It didn't show up in any official registry, not the police database, not even local news, but every so often, in archived forums and old Appalachian folklore threads, the same name kept surfacing: Evelyn Wren. She called herself a medium, someone who could hear what others couldn't. She wasn't famous, not like those TV psychics. She mostly took private referrals from families who had lost someone and wanted closure without the church or the cops involved. In March of 2019, she was contacted by a woman named Caroline Ash, from a small town buried somewhere in the Cumberland foothills, a place so deep in the mountains it doesn't appear on most modern maps. The locals called it Black Hollow. Caroline's brother, Eli, had gone missing while surveying erosion patterns for a forestry project near an abandoned mine called Mare Creek Line. Two search parties had already tried and failed to find him. Both pulled out early, saying the same thing: that something was wrong in the woods, that the air itself felt like it was listening. Caroline told Evelyn she didn't want a detective. She wanted someone who could listen past the ordinary. That phrase caught Evelyn's attention. She agreed to come for 3 nights, and she kept a journal. The following account comes from those notes, along with 2 recovered audio files found near the mine entrance. Everything else, the sheriff's report, the site photos, has been lost or sealed. Evelyn arrived in early March. Black Hollow was colder than she expected, even for that time of year. The mountains leaned so close together, the sun barely touched the valley floor before disappearing again. Caroline met her on the post road with a thermos of coffee, her hands shaking even though it wasn't freezing. The farmhouse sat on land her family had owned for generations, back when mining was still profitable. Evelyn wrote that the house hummed, not literally, more like a pressure in the air, something alive behind the silence. Carolyn told her about Eli. He'd been recording soil data when the radio cut out. His last transmission came through full of static and whispering. Just 3 words: "Don't come down here." They found his notebook later by the creek, pages ripped out after the 4th entry. The next morning, Evelyn followed the trail toward the hollow. She said the trees grew thinner there, the ground darker, not from shadow, but from something in the rock itself, a mineral stain that looked wet even when it hadn't rained. Birds went quiet past a certain bend, the way they do before a storm. And then there was the smell: wet iron. That night, she tried what she called the listening circle, her term for a seance without theatrics. She used copper wire and salt to make the boundary. Caroline sat outside it. When the candles lit, the flames all tilted toward the north wall and stayed that way. Then a voice, not in Evelyn's head, not imagined, a clear female voice that said a single word: "Listener." Caroline heard it too. Evelyn left the circle untouched overnight. When she checked the next morning, the copper wire had blackened in places, and the salt had melted into streaks like tears. She dreamed of the mine entrance breathing. Over breakfast, Caroline told her about a group that used to operate around here in the 1920s, traveling spiritualists who called themselves the Society of the Folded Light. They claimed the hollow amplified spiritual resonance, a kind of crossing point between this world and what lies beneath it. The group disappeared after a cave-in at Mare Creek Line in 1929. Most people chalk it up to bad mining conditions, but some locals still leave offerings at the creek when it rains. That night, Evelyn set her recorder near the parlor wall, the one the candle flame had leaned toward, and started asking questions. The playback later captured a low metallic tapping, Then, what she described as a wet harmony, like multiple tones submerged in water. After she asked, "What are you?" there's a sound like gravel shifting through liquid. Her breathing stops for 3 seconds, then she whispers, "It took my breath and gave it back cold." On the wallpaper, she wrote, she saw a woman's shape, translucent, with dirt running down her arms like water. By the next day, the air inside the house had changed. She wrote that it tasted like dust and copper, and that her own thoughts didn't sound like her anymore. One last letter, unsent, found later among her things, addressed to a mentor named Robert Kessler. In it she wrote, "Black Hollow doesn't contain the dead. It continues them. The miners used to say the hollow swallows sound and feeds it back changed. I think Eli heard something down there and followed it deeper. If I'm wrong, you'll find this with Caroline. She signed it EW." On the morning of March 9th, Evelyn and Carolyn went to the mine. The shaft was sealed with rusted iron, fencing, and collapsed timber. Beyond it, a narrow mouth of stone led into pitch darkness. Handprints, dozens of them, were pressed into the shale like it had softened and hardened again. Evelyn took her lantern and recorder. Carolyn waited by the entrance. The first part of the recovered recording is mostly ambient noise. Footsteps, dripping water, and Evelyn describing what she sees. Then her voice tightens. She says, "There's writing on the wall. It says, 'Stay above the song.'" A few seconds later, the audio distorts, then cuts. The remaining tape is damaged by moisture. A single entry was found in her journal afterward, the last one. She wrote, "They weren't warning him. They were imitating. Something down there learns by echoing us. Every word I said came back slightly wrong. My name returned as hollow." The copper wire snapped. I think it wants to be carried. Caroline said she saw someone behind me, but it wasn't me. If anyone finds this, don't try to listen. That's how it begins. A week later, local authorities searched the area. They found the recorder, half buried in mud near the collapsed entrance of Mare Creek Line. No trace of Evelyn or Caroline. The device contained a continuous tone at 18 hertz, just below human hearing, described by the technician as a pressure more than a sound. The sheriff's report was brief. Case closed due to environmental hazard and incomplete data. That's all that officially exists. A few months after that, people in Claymore started talking again. Strange humming during rainfall. Voices echoing under the bridge when no one else was there. Always low, always rhythmic, and always repeating. Not speech, imitation. Some say it's just wind through the collapsed tunnels. Others say the hollow is still doing what it was made to do, listening, folding every sound that enters it, and feeding it back, changed. Every now and then, a hiker posts about hearing something near the ridge, like a voice carried through running water. Sometimes, if you filter the background frequencies, you can pick out 2 syllables whispered low under the wind. "Listener."